Welcome to Many Roads Traveled, the travel show that takes you on the road with me. Hi, I'm Tamara, and welcome to my very first episode. Woo! So I thought I would do an intro episode, so we get to know each other better, and because I hope you're going to be, traveling with me for quite some time. Since I have now been traveling for over 30 years, or almost 30 years, sorry, and to 76 countries. So I have a lot of travel advice and tales to tell you. So we'll break it down to basically the 5 W's. And I also want to tell you how I even went on this first backpacking trip that I did, which was a 16-month, 30,000-mile overland trip from Paris to Cape Town and then back up to Nairobi. And then I moved to England for 20 years. So needless to say, that trip changed my life. And we're also going to be traveling back in time to 1993. So imagine no internet, no cell phones, no Google Maps. Traveling was much, much different back then. And also, with COVID-19, we've all been stuck at home almost this whole year. Luckily, I did get a month Central American trip in February, so I got back to Canada just before lockdown. So thankful about that. So like I said, I'm going to do the 5 W's of why I'm doing this travel podcast and YouTube channel. So let's start off with who. Well, I'm Tamara. A Canadian Brit. Like I said, I've been traveling for quite some time. Okay, and what? Well, it is a travel podcast as well as YouTube channel. I thought I would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And then for when, it's going to be every Thursday, a new episode will be out. And where? Well, right here. On YouTube. But for my podcast, you can find me on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, basically all of the main big audio apps, as well as my website. So you can always find more info and blog posts. I kind of wanted to cover all 3 mediums, so you have written, audio, and video. So the website is manyroadstraveled.com. So you can always find stuff on there, especially the podcast. Okay, and that brings us to why. Well, I have several reasons why I'm doing this, finally. I should have really done this years ago, to be honest. And it was in the back of my mind for a long time, but with 2020 being stuck at home, I thought this is the perfect time. As well as, at least you can virtual travel with me. Even though we can't really travel too much yet. And it's September now. Okay, so my whys. Well, through the years, my friends especially, but also people I've just met, either just for an hour sometimes, and we get to talk to traveling. Well, every single person has said to me at one point, oh, you need to write a book. And I was like, well, I think I'd have to write an encyclopedia because there's a lot to cover. And then I thought, well, I love telling travel stories, and it seems the people I tell them to enjoy them as well. So why not do a podcast and YouTube channel? So here we are. The second reason is, to inspire people to travel, especially to places you might not have thought of going to due to various reasons, a lot of media coverage and things like that. But especially to inspire females to travel, especially solo. I mean, most of my traveling, I'd say 95% of it or 90% of it is as a solo woman. And I was 23 when I first left for the backpacking trip, the African trip, which is the first of my series. Like I said, I want to kind of do a series per trip because I've done such long overland trips. It just kind of, it's a bit more cohesive that way. And I also, another reason is I've listened to a lot of great travel podcasts before, but I want to do something different. It's like, so this way I'm literally taking you not only back in time, but also on the road with me. So each episode will be one destination. And even though it was, like I said, 93, 94 that I did this trip, I end each episode with at least 3 travel, like top, I call it Tam's top tips. So travel tips that are updated. And also my website will have updated blog posts, which will be more like kind of a guide. So say, for example, like I started this trip in Paris, so the blog post will be updated about what's happening or prices and things like that, or where to stay in Paris. So covering as much as I possibly can to help you, really. And that's also, the reason is, to impart my 30 years of traveling, pass on my experiences and what to do, what not to do. There'll be a lot of what not to do. Because if you look at other travel blogs or listen to other podcasts or watch, the travel channels, especially about solo female traveling, I basically do the opposite a lot of the time, not saying do that at all. Hence why I say what not to do. But hey, I'm still here, although I probably have used up more lives than a cat at this point. And another reason is to entertain you, like I said, with my travel stories. Like I've experienced and seen and tasted and smelt and heard lots of amazing things throughout my years. And I just want to impart that with you. And like I said, hopefully entertain you if nothing else. And then the final reason is also I want to inspire people who have disabilities or chronic illnesses like myself. I have a very rare blood disease. Apparently I'm very famous in the blood world, and I've had multiple surgeries. As you can see, my hands are pretty screwed up, and I've had 6 surgeries on them already, with a few more to come. But also my illness causes, it's kind of like having arthritis in your blood. So it affects me daily. It just depends on how much and where. It changes hourly. So it's kind of like having arthritis in your blood. And it's really, like now, like I just turned 50, and it's really affected my knees, and as you can see, my hands, but it can affect anywhere. And it also can cause very, very bad abscesses that have led to me almost dying 3 times with septicemia and being in hospitals for weeks on end. So my point is that if I can do it, even at my age, then you can too. You might not have to do all the crazy shit I did, but at least you can get to these areas, get to these cities or countries or places. And, my advice for if you do suffer with poor health is, you're going to be sick wherever you are in the world. So why not be sick doing something you enjoy or love? My motto is, is like, well, rather than being stuck at home and then getting depressed and whatever, get out on the road and go to places. And if you have a bad episode, you just stop and rest for as much as you need. And throughout the world, whenever that's happened to me, plus I've also got almost every tropical illness you can think of too on top of that. But local people and other travelers have always looked after me. And that's the thing. People around the world are generally very kind. And regardless of what you hear in the media, I mean, the best hospitality I've ever received is in Muslim countries, is in the Middle East. It was ridiculous how kind and generous they were. So that's what I like to do, is to inspire and motivate you once ever COVID ever ends, of course, if we could get back out in the world, then yes, do it. And that's another thing. Traveling has changed definitely from the 90s, but it's also going to be changed now. I mean, whether what's happening with flights, whether they're going to be half full, so the prices of flights are going to go up. And then same with like accommodation, Airbnbs, things like that. It's all changing. Nobody really still knows exactly what it's going to be like. But that's the thing. Like with my traveling, I've always traveled by land. Usually like land or water, right? So I'll usually just fly into my first destination and then fly home from the last destination. And it's always via public transport or hitching, because weirdly, I still don't have my driver's license, so I don't know. So it's public transport, which I think nowadays is called green traveling, and we have to do more of that, as well as cut down on plastics. Like I now travel with those soap bars and conditioner bars, and also I highly recommend getting these water filter straws. They're awesome, so it cuts down on you by having to buy plastic water all the time. So yeah, so lots of little things like that you will learn and kind of go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I hope anyways. Okay, now how did I go on this? And which was also my first and longest and hardest trip that I've ever done. So yes, how did I end up going on this 30,000-mile road trip from Paris to Cape Town and then back up to Nairobi? Well, we have to go back in time to 1992, and the year before I had taken a year, I had done 2 years at university and I'd taken a year out. And I just was like, I gotta get the hell out of here. So my dad was a skier, and I went through my dad's ski brochures, and I just picked out a couple of hotels that looked nice down the west coast. I'm from Ontario, near Toronto. And just applied, just sent my resume, my CV resume off to about 5 different hotels on the west coast, or in Alberta and BC. And yeah, I got a job in a couple of them, right? But I chose Banff, and so I went out there when I was 21 and had a brilliant year out there. It was amazing. I highly recommend Banff. It's an awesome little place in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. Beautiful. And then I came back to Ontario after a year, 92, and I was just working, bartending 2 jobs. And that's another thing. People always ask, how can you afford to travel so much? Well, first of all, I travel on a budget, even now. Now might get my own rooms a bit more than what I did back then. But yeah, it's budget. You can do it, And again, you learn that through my travel show. So I was working bartending 2 jobs, not really going out, like just saving. And my plan, I didn't know if it existed, but I was going to create it if it didn't, was I was going to the Caribbean to like yacht hitch around the Caribbean, or yacht hop. That was my plan. But then in the summer, a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for 5 years, he was an old high school friend of mine, but we hadn't seen just about 5 years. And he came into one of the bars I was working at, quite drunk. And his name's Casey. And he was asking me what I was doing. And I said, I'm taking another year out. This is what I'm planning on doing. And what about yourself? And he said, oh, I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking another year out. But my plan is to go from Paris to Cape Town by land. Like, no flying, except obviously to Paris. You should come with me. I'm like, no, thank you very much. That sounds crazy. I'll be just going to the Caribbean. And so anyways, he said, well, let's just meet up for lunch next week to have a catch up. I'm like, okay. So we did that. And he was hard selling this trip to go with him, because he was going by himself at that point. And I was still like, no way, Jose. And he was like, well, listen, I have this Lonely Planet, Africa on a Shoestring, it was called. I think it was probably the only guidebook around back then for like all of Africa. So he's like, just borrow this and just look through it and then let me know what you think. So I'm like, fine, just to shut him up. I'm like, okay, take it. Well, of course, over the next couple weeks, I'm reading it. And I'm like, wow, this actually sounds like quite amazing. So I call him up, like probably 2 weeks later. I'm like, okay, fine. When are we leaving? And he was planning on going in December. I was like, well, I won't have enough money till January. So if you can wait till then I'll come. He's like, yeah, of course, no problem. So I thought, he would have been on the ball and figured out how we were going to get to Africa from Paris. But no, he didn't even have a guidebook for Europe or Middle East, which I learned throughout the trip. I also thought that when I left, I was going to be gone for 6 months. Well, I ended up being gone for 22 years. So you never know what's going to happen. And again, back then, like I said, there was no internet. You couldn't book online. It was always just as you go along, you find somewhere to stay and eat, and especially for Europe. I mean, we didn't have a guidebook for any of that. So that was totally winging it. But yeah, so that about sums up my intro. So I hope that you will join me on this first series. And it's gonna, I hope you really like it. Okay, so like I said, every Thursday there will be a new video out. And please leave your comments below, any questions you have about traveling or that area or destination that I've covered in that week. And obviously get it back over to the website for any updated info and blogs, and to find the podcast in case you prefer audio. Okay, and like I said, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a step along the way. Okay, thank you so much again for watching, and we'll see you soon. Okay, until then, safe travels, one road at a time.